Good evening, everyone. I'm just so excited. I just could just spend my whole time looking at the chat. For those of you who have been jumping in, I see Dana. Here I am. I'm showing my age. I'm doing the romper room lady. I see Dana Kubis. If I said your last name wrong, sorry about that. Music 1 through 5 at a public district. This is your first session. I love I think this is the first time we've had actually we've had a lot of related services, personnel, speech path, psychologists, but this is the first time I think we've had someone from like music or the arts or theater, and I absolutely love that. So welcome, Dana. I saw some early start early folks. Nicole Sherwood, preschool para. Yes, I started my career in this business as a classroom assistant. So welcome. Some special ed and a pre-K social worker, 3 to 5. This is my first session. I'm just looking at all of the people who are attending and just sharing where you're from. See a lot of Head Start instructional coaches on here, some Head Start, special ed, self-contained. Woohoo, Samantha, special ed in the house. We rock. I don't play any favors, but there you go. Always love having our special ed partners. Katie Clemson and all the administrators who have joined us today. Truly developmentally appropriate practices, special education, DEC recommended practices. It is truly grass tops and grassroots. And we know that the more information that our administrators have to support the teaching and learning that goes on in our classrooms, support the teachers, the classroom assistants, help engage families. It just takes the work and makes it go that much farther. Gladys, Marin, and Atala Barrera, pre-K dual teachers. And literally right before you all came on today, I said, oh, Susie, I forgot to include a link about the Illinois Early Learning WIDA Illinois Early Learning Years. And so later on, we'll be putting a link in here that just will give all of you information to the resources that ECPL offers for WIDA. And then I'm trying to find it again. I actually saw a colleague who is from Wisconsin and said, I just love all things DAP. So if I can't find it, if you would not mind raising your hand. I thought I saw that on here somewhere. So many people are coming in, I may not be able to go back and find it. There you are, Tiffany Swain, Early Childhood Content and Outreach for Wisconsin Early Childhood Collaborating Partners. Love all things DAP. We need to connect because you're just right across I was going to say right across the street, but in my mind, it is right across the border there. We need to connect, right? We can make these collaborations go even farther beyond Illinois and Wisconsin. So it is so great to see you. And saying that, I get an opportunity to say welcome and welcome back. So many of you have been with us for the entire 3 previous sessions. A few of you have been on for 1 or 2. And then for some of you, this is your first one. So I want to just welcome back everyone. And for those of you that are your first time joining in this series, as Susie said, for the first, we're going to briefly go through a recap of each of the previous 3 sessions. Also, ECPL is housing all of the sessions so that at your leisure, you can go back and look at those sessions, use them for in-services if you want, sharing with your other colleagues. Of course, you cannot get a CEU if you watch a recording, but they're all available for you. We wanted to build this series so that people could do it as the full smorgasbord or kind of do it a la carte as your schedule allows. So for those of you where this is your first one, again, we're going to do a brief recap, and then you will get a link where you will have access, as Susie said, so you can go and watch any of the previous webinars that took place on talking about developmentally appropriate practices and maximizing equitable, high quality early childhood education and care. And we're just excited that we've come to March 14th. We actually And it feels like we started having these conversations at this same time last year. Like, we know we need to do something together, but what is that something that we need to do? And here we are on our last one, kind of anchoring it all and observing, documenting, and assessing children's development and learning. I am the person's voice that you hear now is myself, Dr. Antoinette Taylor. A little bit of information about me. As Susie said, I am joined today by Ann Kramer and Katie Suchi, who will be sharing a little bit more about themselves. And this person here, who I have nicknamed the true every woman, Evelyn Green, who is the STARNET 5 project director. She's also the president of Illinois DEC. She is the co-chair of the 2023 Sharing a Vision Conference, which is sponsored by Illinois DEC, and was the co-chair for the 38th Annual International Conference of Young Children with Disabilities, which is the international arm of DEC, which was held in Illinois last fall. So she's truly every woman. She doesn't like for me to say that. I'm patting her on the back because it is absolutely the truth. So why are we all coming together to do this? Because it strengthens cross-system partnerships. You have the state board, you have early choices, you have STARNET, you have ECPL, all agencies and organizations that really are, the goal is to support teachers, paraprofessionals, administrators, families, everyone that is working with our youngest and most, I say the most important, right? Because if you build a structure well from the ground up, the foundation is pure and strong, and then so that everything that comes on top of that is also pure and strong. So our youngest learners are just so valuable. So it makes sense that ECPL, STARNET, and Early Choices comes together to present this information from a collective point of view. And this actually, the brainchild for this actually started during the summer of the pandemic. ECPL was doing several, as everybody was doing things virtual, it was like the virtual introduction to kindergarten, and it was all about pre-K to K transitions in a virtual world. And the feedback that came from all of those sessions was people were saying, we love hearing information, but we're getting so much of it from so many different places. We'd love to just hear one collective voice presenting us information. And so that really was the catalyst that brought us here today. We're Early Choices, ECPL, and STARNET, the collective STARNET regions, are bringing this information to you together today. Everything that we're going to be talking about is grounded in the National Association for the Education of Young Children, their most recent developmentally appropriate practice resource tool. The book is in its 4th edition. Surprise, surprise, some of you are going to get one of those books. And then also the Division of Early Childhood DEC recommended practices. Once again, we learned that it's not only important for a collection of cross-system, cross-sector supporters to come together to present information. It's also important for us to look at the information that several organizations such as DEC and NAEYC present. And then our goal throughout this series has been to kind of thread the needle between develop DEC recommended practices for students with a disability, young learners with a diagnosis, and students just overall. What does it mean to understand developmentally appropriate practices? So everything that we're doing is grounded in that. We got a lot of information to cover, everyone, so we go straight through. We don't take a formal break. Self-care is so important. So if you need to get up, get some tea, some hot chocolate, according to where you are in the state, it might be warm, it might be a little cooler. Feel free to do that. Keep your sound up and so that you can hear us, and then come on back and jump in, because we will not have an official break. We will be asking you to share information in the chat with us. This is a safe space where we show grace. That is not a incorrectly spelled word. That's our way of telling you as educators, we can take off our educator hat and our administrator hat. We're not dotting I's and crossing T's and is that semicolon in the right place, yes or no? Just go ahead and jump in the chat and brainstorm when we ask you to. There is no judgment here. Yes, there's going to be a free giveaway. 5 of you will receive the actual 4th edition of the NAEYC DAP book. It's such a hot commodity. When I got mine, I did a little jig in my office space, and we will 5 people will get this giveaway. As Susie said, we do ask that you stay on throughout because that's one of the things that determines. And then what ultimately will happen is ECPL does a name draw, but we'll check it to make sure that the books are only going to people who have not received them previously. So 5 books will be given away. And I'm telling you, it's such a great commodity. And even within that book, it has more resources that you may not find in the DAP position paper when you go online. So as we get started, thinking about the NAE, as I've been saying it 1,000 times, 4th edition position statement, how much would you say you know and use the position statement thus far? Is it a small size fry, a medium fry, or a large fry? Go ahead and put that in the chat. How familiar are you and how have you used the NAEYC DAP 4th edition position statement? Are you a small, a medium, or a large fry? Go ahead and put that in the Oh, I love it. Mary Jacobs is like, I'm not only a small, I'm a kids meal small. I love it. Oh, Erica, welcome to early childhood special ed. Coming back to early childhood from special ed. We've got someone that says, hey, I don't even know enough to know what I don't know. I'm not even a small fry. So the majority of you are small fries and medium fries, which, as we know, if you're preschool for all, you're already familiar with the fact that ongoing professional learning really means no matter where you would fall on this, we can always come back. Like I've had my book forever, and every time I go through it, I'm amazed that I find something new. So thank you all so much for sharing. So you already know what the next question is. You can kind of surmise, especially those of you that have been with us. I switched the pictures out, so, give you a little bit of something new there. So DEC recommended practices, and these are the recommended practices that come directly to you from the Division of Early Childhood with a focal point on young children with a documented disability. How familiar are you and how much do you use them? We switched it up here. I don't know if I'm going to be ready, if my summer body is going to be ready, if I keep thinking about French fries and shakes, but there you go. Go ahead and put in the chat and let us know, are you a mini blast, a small, a medium, or a large when it comes to the DEC recommended practices? Lots of minis. Courtney's a mini. Janae is a mini. Nicole is a mini. I love that, Laura. Small question mark. So you almost could be like, I get a small, but then as I'm going through it, I realize, okay, my eyes were bigger than my stomach. I really don't know as much as I might want to know. And the truth is, the reason we wanted to integrate this information is that we do find that there are less people familiar with DEC's recommended practices than there are with NAEYC's developmentally appropriate practices. So as we thread throughout today, you'll have a little opportunity to learn more. Susie mentioned the reflection, the handouts, and in those handouts, there is a reflection tool. And so as we go through this day, take some time to jot some notes down, and at the end of our time together, we're going to just be completely silent and give you an opportunity to kind of put everything together. And then you can kind of have it like as a graphic organizer to take the work forward. So what's our brief recap from October 12th? That's where we just did the introduction. We talked about DEC's recommended practices, which were actually published right before Every Student Succeeds Act was finalized in 2015. Here's the greatest thing that I love about the recommended practices is that it explicitly says these are practices that are, yes, they are intended for young children with disabilities, but they are not solely for children who have been diagnosed or will be eligible under services under IDEA, which is huge because we want everybody to know that if something works for one student, chances are that it will work for many. The DEC recommended practices have 8 topics, and each of these related topics kind of have indicators with them. But here are the 8 topics. And so as you look at this, you'll be able to see how they're easily thread with the developmentally appropriate practices through NAEYC. We talked about the NAEYC position statement, gives us a purpose, why we're doing this. You see that it includes birth through age 8, which we all know is the true continuum of early childhood education, birth through age 8. They're so explicit, and I love that the new paper talks about culturally, linguistically, and ability appropriate. They didn't really leave anything for imagination. They're very explicit about what they talked about. Then we went into the guiding principles of the new statement. One of the things that is new is that the previous statement had 12 guiding principles. The new statement has 9. Here again, we see that conversation about linguistic development, bilingual or multilingual development, really talking about the whole child, which has always been through CDC, but the pandemic really is making us talk about how do we educate, how do we provide opportunities for the whole child, every child, whole child. And then in January, we had creating a caring, equitable community of learners. And you know what, my takeaway from this is always creating. So it lets us know that this is not something that happens through osmosis. It actually is something that we have to create this equitable community of learners. That means everyone is valued, relationships are nurtured, we are respectful, we hold each other accountable, right? We look at all of the parts. If you're talking about the whole child of every child, this is what the whole child of every child brings to us. Ethnicity, gender, age, sexuality, all of these things we are factoring in when we're thinking about our children, and I might add our colleagues and our families as well. We portray every child positively in materials and displays. Of course, what's up on the wall is only as effective as what we're doing person to person and child to child. We nurture our relationships. That sense of belonging is so key. And each and every member, and those of you that are familiar with Eckers 3, you already know they talk a lot about interactions, peer-to-peer interactions, adult-to-child interactions, adult-to-adult interactions. So that was a lot there. That's our preview of what we've talked about. But just in that quick snippet, what we want you to do is share one aha, but don't press enter yet. You're going to go into the chat, type in, and then I will count you down. And I'll say 3, 2, 1, and we'll do what's called a chat blast, and everyone will press enter at one time. So of all that information, did you catch one aha? And we'd like for you to go ahead and place that in the chat. And then I'll give you the countdown. About 10 more seconds, and then I'll give you the countdown. Okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, enter. Yes, Tony, love that whole child approach. Shannon, everything connects in early childhood education. Yeah, Julie, it is, especially in education. We're so initiative and new reform driven. It's really nice to see NAEYC say, you know what, we can really say the same thing in 9 principles that we said with 12. And then what they did is really connected them more so that you didn't need 12. We just needed 9. A lot of you are saying considering the whole child. Erica, I need to freshen up on my ECH language and figure out DAP. Hopefully we'll help you do that tonight. Penny, of course, everyone being valued and nurtured is so, so very important. Sarah, if it works for one, chances are it works for many. And I think as educators, we really need to hear that. Educators, as a consultant, we need to be consulting in that way. As administrators, we need to be helping our educators and paraprofessionals see the connectivity in the work, because no one has any more room on their plate or on their tray for anything else. So if we can look at one practice and understand how that practice supports even our gifted and talented learners, right? Every child doesn't have a disability, and DEC is about children that are gifted and talented, as well as those who might be facing barriers in learning. So as much as we can take our practices and synthesize them, then it makes it easier for teachers and educators and paraprofessionals to implement practices to fidelity without feeling overwhelmed. Love this chat blast here. Thank you all so much for sharing.
Okay. Hello, everybody. My name is Katie Suki, and these are a few photos of me and my lovely family. I'm an early childhood special education professional development specialist with STARNET Region 2, and I'm involved in a number of things, but a big part of my role is focused on curriculum and assessment implementation and making it work for all children. So I'm very excited to be here with everybody this afternoon talking about this topic. So what is the topic we're focusing on today? That is the part of the NAEYC position statement on developmentally appropriate practice, focusing on observing, documenting, and assessing children's development and learning. So let's just break these down a little bit, and then we'll talk about what it looks like in practice. So for starters, we want to think about that observation, documentation, and assessment is ongoing, strategic, reflective, and purposeful. It focuses on children's progress, not just mastery of a skill. That's an idea we'll come back to several times tonight. When you have goals, okay.
I was like, I don't know what happened.
Just making sure. Okay, so when we are creating goals, that they reflect families' input as well as children's background, knowledge, and experiences. So there should be a system in place to guide that process, and that the methods of assessment recognize individual variation, allowing children to demonstrate their competencies in different ways. So that's A through D. And then the next slide, we have a few more for you. Assessments are used only for the populations and purposes for which they have been demonstrated to produce reliable, valid information. Again, we'll kind of break down what that means a little bit later. Decisions that have a major impact on children are made in consultation with families. And when a screening assessment identifies a child who may have a disability or individualized learning or developmental needs, there's appropriate follow-up, such as an evaluation, and if needed, a referral. So for starters, let's look at NAEYC's definition of assessment. Assessment is a system of collecting and documenting information about children's learning and development in order to monitor progress towards learning goals, make curriculum decisions, and improve teaching practices. But what does that kind of fancy jargon-filled definition really mean? We're going to watch a short video here. It's about 4 minutes long, and as you watch, I want you to put into the chat what resonates with you as to what you feel like authentic assessment in early childhood means? What jumps out at you? What are your big takeaways? So as you watch the video, go ahead and put this in the chat. Some people are already getting after it. Love that. Go ahead and play.
Authentic assessment provides ongoing information about a child's progress to help parents and practitioners work together to support the child's learning and participation.
Well, I believe assessment is not a one-shot deal. It is not a one-time thing. It's something that's going on all day long. It's just a part of our everyday curriculum. The information that I gather at one assessment point guides my work with each child.
Ongoing assessment helps me to describe a child's progress, and in turn it helps me to become a more effective communicator with families and allows us to celebrate a child's achievements together.
Authentic assessment is about the whole child. It looks at all aspects of growth and development.
An assessment system helps me make sure that I'm observing children in all areas of their development. I observe the kids in all their activities and interactions so I can understand how each area of development influences another.
Authentic assessment is naturalistic. We observe children in their daily routine, their typical routines and activities with familiar people.
By observing the children in their typical routines and their play activities, I learn how I can tailor the curriculum to best fit each child's needs.
In order to get to know Emily, you would have to observe her in different settings on different days and observations by different people who are important in her life, and then all of that information coming together.
By combining the information from different sources, we develop a more complete, valid, and useful picture of the child.
I really like that the teacher tells me what she's doing throughout the day. For example, her pictures and new songs and the things that she's learning.
Well, as a family child care provider, ongoing assessments help me in a lot of ways. Helps me to plan curriculum and our classroom environment, indoor as well as outdoor.
I like that her teacher shows us her progress through her work. This information gives us ideas of how we can make learning opportunities for our daughter at home.
Assessment provides me with ongoing information about how the child is doing and the progress that they're making, and it helps me to work together with families to come up with strategies to help a child learn.
Assessment information lets me know how my child is developing, what I can expect next, and gives me information that I can use every day to help my child meet those goals.
I have to give you all the music.
Yeah, play us out. Okay, if you have not already put your thoughts into the chat, go ahead and do that now. Take just a few moments here. Again, the idea being, what resonated with you? What jumped out to you about the importance of, or really the definition of authentic assessment in early childhood classrooms? Yes, 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 absolutely. So while everybody is still, keep responding, keep it going. I'm watching it as it comes up. And if you want to click one forward. So this was a lot of what everybody was capturing in the chat. I saw ongoing the most, which I think is absolutely a significant part of all of this. It's ongoing not only throughout the entire school year, but daily as well. It should be, which means that we need to have that system in place to ensure that we're collecting data on all children and across all learning domains. Observation-based, as many of you mentioned in the chat, based on what we see a child do and what we hear them say. And naturalistic was another one that jumped out for a lot of people, that is happening in the classroom and during play and routines, as well as in the home environment. And so that's where that family component comes into play, and getting observations and information from what families are seeing at home. I saw a few people mention that. I think that was such a big aha from that video for me. was that, this isn't all just what's happening in the classroom, but that home piece as well. And that it is developmentally appropriate. That's another key component, that we are looking for what is developmentally appropriate for the children in our classrooms, and not, taking unrealistic expectations or expectations that are not developmentally appropriate and putting them upon the kids in our rooms. So great. I'm just looking through the chat one more time. Great observations that are in the chat about what this is. If you did not respond, or you just want to see what everybody else said, take a moment to scroll through there, because there's a lot of great ideas. And I think that really, really hammers home, what the position statement is saying, and all that kind of complex letters and jargon, and, what this really looks like in practice. So it's important to remember that assessment isn't just something we do because it's part of compliance, or because, our bosses are telling us to do it. We don't just do it to check it off a list that it's done, but it does serve several purposes, such as tracking progress and development of students, guiding your lesson plans so you know what to teach next, communicating with others. We can have conversations with classroom teams, related services, and our IEP teams, and share data. And not only can we communicate better with our teams in the classroom environments, in the school environments, but we can communicate what we are seeing with families, and in turn find out what families are seeing as well, because we know children are going to demonstrate skills differently across different environments. And assessment also helps us to identify areas of need within programs. In summary, we need assessment information to drive our instruction, and then our instruction will then inform our assessment. You want to observe to figure out what your students know, what they're able to do. So that top part of our cycle here. And then we'll document what you see and hear, interpreting that documentation, which typically involves using your assessment tool. So you might think about that like your evaluate or analyzing stage, which will then help you determine what you'll plan and teach on next, which then of course allows us to know what and who we will observe next. So we refer to this as the assessment cycle, and it's important to note that it is circular, it's not linear, and so that each stage is influencing the next, and it's ongoing. That was such a key takeaway for all of us during that video. And your program's identified authentic assessment system that you use in your program, it might have different requirements, but typically we see these types of documentation. So a lot of it will be anecdotal notes, which you might call observational notes. It might be a photo, video, or audio recording that also has a note with it. It could be a work sample, such as, child's artwork or something they create. Or again, it can be a family observation that is gathered through a simple conversation, a phone call, or a meeting like your conferences or IEP meetings. We want to take all of that evidence into account. And again, I'm just going to reiterate that family piece. It's so crucial, as we heard in the video, to get that full picture of development. We know that children are going to demonstrate their skills differently across different environments. And so we want to get that feedback from families and give them our feedback as well, so we can help the child in school and out of school. So not only does documentation help us as teachers, allowing us to get to know each and every child and plan to support their learning and scaffold them to get to the next level, but it's also for children. It helps them connect their learning from day to day, and it gives value to their efforts. And of course, it's for families as well, so that they can not only understand the value of play, but connect with their child and bring that learning home. It's so much easier to find out what the child did at school when you have documentation to refer to. And it's important to remember that the whole purpose of documentation is to record the process of learning, not just the mastery of skills or what a child does well. We'll use the term strengths-based a lot, but this doesn't mean that it's just what a child does really well. It means that it's what a child can do. And we need to know where a child is in order to plan and to make that plan and support continued growth and learning. So we always need to remind ourselves that children don't learn the same thing in the same way at the same time, and that they don't show what they know in the same way. So this is an example. Some of you probably use the GOLD tool, though there's many assessment tools that you might use. This is an example for objective 29, which is demonstrates knowledge of self. And I know when I'm working with programs, I see, typically if a teacher's trying to gather documentation on this objective, they might want students to draw a family portrait. But really, how many students is that really appropriate for? Think of all the skills that a child needs before they're able to do that. When in reality, there's multiple ways that a child can demonstrate that particular skill. So there's some examples on this slide, it can be as simple as saying their name and their age, right? That tells a lot about themselves. It might be that family portrait that they draw, or it might be being able to find their own backpack after given direction from the teacher, or simply a child just making faces and watching their own face in the mirror. And as we think about each child as an individual and we continue to improve our own assessment processes, we must continually reflect on and work against biases that may get in the way of assessing a child accurately and cause us to not be able to use the results of the assessment appropriately. So while this is a huge topic, there's some small steps that you can take daily to minimize the impact of your biases. Such as recognizing your own culture and the way that it influences the lens which you view and interact with the world. Focusing on each child's strengths. Again, in this case, we mean focusing on what a child can do, not necessarily what they do well or have mastered, but whatever level they're at, what they can do. To help with this, we want to use multiple assessment strategies and allow children to show what they know in their own way. And of course, using tools that have been proven valid and reliable for the populations from which you work with. And again, a lot of times we see teachers that are struggling to gather documentation on a child who maybe speaks a different language than them, or who might have an IEP that's has some language goals on there. And so the first thing that you want to do is to look at your tool to determine which standards are really dependent on language and which can be observed and don't require a verbal response from a child at all, because you'll really be surprised. It's really very few that require some kind of verbal response. And so, of course, when you need one, then use an interpreter as needed. And then again, that is where those observations from families really come in handy. And so when we're thinking about reliability, we want to make sure, or again, this is just recapping what we said, that to make sure that the tool is valid and reliable for the groups that you work with, because we want to minimize that bias when working with children. So a few benefits of using high quality research-based curriculum and assessment tools, and Anne will talk about curriculum more in a second, is that they allow us to scaffold up and down to meet the needs of all children, regardless of their age or developmental ability. Many of them have built-in tools and resources to support all learners, so you're not tasked with coming up with it all on your own. And it again allows us to communicate with our related service teams, with other teachers, with paraprofessionals, and with families much better. And so ultimately, when we use these tools all together, we can support better outcomes for students. And really, that's why we do all of this together, isn't it?
So thanks, Katie. I'm sharing the PowerPoint, so I don't know the order. Oh, there's my slide. Yeah, I appreciate the kind of that bird's eye view of assessment, and we're going to talk a little bit more about assessment as we move along. But I haven't had a chance to say hello, so you get like a mid presentation. Hi. So my name's Ann Kramer. I'm the project leader for Early Choices, which is the inclusion initiative here in Illinois for birth to 5. And I see some friends online, so some of you I know, but there's lots of new faces too. So I'm glad you're here. Our job is to support programs in including young children. So a lot of I'm going to take a little bit of the assessment work that Katie talked about and just talk a little bit specifically around kiddos with disabilities. And then we'll move into that curriculum and planning and implementing to reach goals. So we've got like a huge chunk content here. So, but before I dive in, yeah, I've got some pictures up here, a little bit about me. Some of my favorite people up here, right? I've got my mom and my daughter who just got married this year, my son, my stepdaughter, my granddaughter up there in the corner. And I'm actually from Wisconsin, so I was happy to know there was someone on from Wisconsin. So I'm a Packer fan and go back on a regular basis. So, and this is the whole Early Choices team. So you might know some other Early Choices folks. That was our gathering this winter to have an in-person meeting, kind of a rare event these days. So, but I'd like to know from you. So either you can use the chat, or you can even just use like those emojis that are like, you know, in the dots when you can do the hand gestures and give me a thumbs up or a clap or something. But how many of you work with, oh goodness, now there we go. How many of you also know that you serve children with disabilities or children with special needs? Give me an indication like, yeah, okay, Jennifer's got her hand up. I got some thumbs, got me. Yes. Awesome. Okay. All right. Awesome. Oh, and Gloria, Antoinette, you missed. Gloria's in Ghana. Like Wisconsin's next door. I know. How'd you miss that? She's like across, it's probably like 2 a.m. wherever she is. Who knows? That was awesome. We had an international guest. So, awesome. So I see a lot of you do, and that's great. And I thank you for letting me know and giving kind of that little perspective. And so when we think about assessment and children with disabilities, you know, one of the premises around developmentally appropriate practices is using the appropriate tools with the appropriate you know, for the reasons they're intended to be used. And so when we're looking at kiddos with disabilities, you know, sometimes just like everybody, there's a whole wide variety of strengths and needs. And so we really want to use our assessment information to help us to really design that instruction to meet their needs. And so I just want to make sure when we're doing that, and I think the video that Katie shared with us was so awesome because it talks so much about families and including families. And this is an article from NAEYC around the 5 R's of, you know, including families in some of that when you're making decisions and informing them of what you've learned in assessment. And I know that can be really intimidating if you haven't done that before and you're like, oh my goodness, I've got some assessment data and this kiddo is not where I think mom and dad think that they might be. And I have to share this with them. And how in the world am I supposed to do that if you haven't had that opportunity, haven't had to do that before? And so this article was just a great resource around thinking through kind of how you do that and how you share information and really building those relationships with families. And I know that many of you already do that, right? You have a great relationship. That's why the children are with you all the time. But if you're looking for some extra pointers, I think Susie was going to put the link in the chat for you if it's not in the additions. But oh, Gloria says she's actually visiting Chicago. Okay, so she's not up at 2 a.m. And there's the link from Antoinette. So yeah, involving families and keeping families in the loop, a good article to share and think about. And so the other piece is, we've shared these in previous sessions, but if this is your first go around with us on these, the DEC recommended practices checklists are a great resource. These are definitely in that handout that we sent with like all the links. And this one is specifically around supporting families in being part of that decision making. And the great thing about the DEC recommended practices is that they go birth to 8. So they're can be very helpful no matter where you are. So if you're working with young children, infants and toddlers, all the way to preschoolers. So but these checklists, they can be used to kind of help you evaluate your own practice and think about what are we doing to support our families. And they can be used as a group. You can do them with a team and talk it through. You can use it individually as a guide to kind of get yourself going. And there's plenty, we're going to show you a lot of these checklists today, but this one, ties so nicely into this assessment piece and thinking about that evaluation. Sometimes if you're involved in evaluating a child to decide if they're eligible for services or not, this, kind of gets a little bit more formal than when we're talking. So we've kind of moved on, I tip my hand there, to the eligibility piece. And so some of you may be involved in determining eligibility. And again, going back to sharing that information and making those connections that, especially in early childhood special ed, when a child's eligible, we give them an eligibility, right? They're eligible under speech and language, they're eligible under intellectual disability, developmental delay, autism, whatever. And those are kind of the key to opening the door to services for our young children. And so, but it's not a label that means that because they have this, they get this, right? It's to get them in the door for eligibility. And I know a lot of you use the developmental delay to kind of give those young kiddos time for a while before we go into some of those other labels. And then of course we use this information to make decisions about what kinds of supports children need and create their individualized education program when they're 3. But again, those labels don't drive their placement. They drive their services. And so just a little reminder about that special education is a service, not a place. I always like to think of special education as a backpack that a kiddo can put on, and their services can go in that backpack. And we want to make sure that we can support those kiddos wherever they are. So they're very portable. I just love that picture. Kids are so cute. So in addition to those checklists, there are great resources in the practice guides. So ECTA, the Early Childhood Technical Assistance Center, has created these practice guides for all of the recommended practices, but today we're talking specifically about the assessment ones. So you can see here, these practice guides kind of tell you what is authentic child assessment, and then it will give you kind of some bullet points and then a quick peek, and you can even watch a video of these. So another good resource as we're talking about these practices and kind of how they intersect. Just wanted to share all that, all of those. And look, here I even have, we love our checklists, I tell you. So there's even more, right? So these are here around, all of those pieces that Katie just talked about, right? Authentic assessment, naturalistic assessment, and using children's strengths. So that's our little wrap up on assessment. And then we still have 2 more whole principles to get through today. Oh my goodness. Because we have they're big and they're the meat of teaching, right? So principle 4 is around teaching to enhance development and learning. That's what we're all doing. That's what we do every day, right? And so I'm going to really take a high view, kind of a bird's eye view of these, and really thinking through kind of the strategies that are in place to support kiddos' development and learning no matter where they are, and supporting them in not only learning and growing, but in regulating themselves and interacting with their peers. So we want to pull all these things together, and we do that through our teaching and providing them with some choices and giving them some agency over their play. But look at all these words. So these are all of those elements around developmentally appropriate practices for development and learning. And again, I'm just going to call out a few keywords here that really this is where there's a lot of overlap. I think back to the developmentally appropriate practices session we did in January, and we talked a lot about that sense of belonging and building caring communities. And here's where that kind of overlaps right away. And then there's those more specific planning of our teaching, where we use what we know about the kiddos that we've learned from those assessments to make our learning experiences meaningful and accessible. And we plan our environment, our schedule, our daily activities. We pull all that together and we use good teaching strategies. We scaffold and we differentiate as we need to. And then principle 5, this one's that planning and implementing your curriculum to achieve meaningful goals. So this is where we take those plans and really look at kind of digging in deeper around where are we going with this. And so again, a whole lot of words here. I'll just call out a few, is that piece around the curriculum is a framework that we use to guide us. And it gives us some good frames to work within, but it's not so structured that it's scripted out or anything, right? It gives us that flexibility, and we base it all in early childhood on play. So we have to be flexible. And so I think those are kind of the key points around curriculum. And we're very intentional, this is pretty much the same cycle that Katie shared with using that assessment information to drive our curriculum and build in those strategies in our instruction. So what we know about teaching is really that first word, is that it's intentional, right? That's the thing that you learned way back when you were just beginning, is that the more intentional you were, the better the day went, right? That was one of my aha moments when I was an early teacher. And so we've got a little video here, and it's about kind of being intentional, and it's very short, just like a minute and a half. So I'm gonna go ahead, get your fingers ready to chit chat in the chat. And I'm going to get that queued up here. And just what jumps out at you in her strategies on being intentional.
Every day before center time, we do an activity menu, and I'll showcase on the rug a little sampling of everything that's available.
During center time, we have lots of activities that have to do with gardens, and I want you to keep thinking about this as we go through centers, okay? So let me show you your choices.
There's something concrete, visual in front of them, reminding them of what it is that their options are for that day, and I think that it makes a big difference.
In the sensory table, you will see that there is soil. So there's all these little pots, and there's shovels over there, and what you can do is practice planting. What do you think I have here? Seeds.
Because if you initiate very well and you get them engaged and excited and interested in what it is that they're doing, then they're more likely to stay with the activity longer.
So you said they need sunshine. If they need sunshine, where do you think we could put them in the classroom?
Science.
Where in science?
On the windowsill.
Why on the windowsill?
Okay, anybody want to say anything about her intentionality there? Let's see. Concrete visuals. Yeah, I loved her prepping the kiddos before the center, right? Just like, okay, this is what you're going to find. And I love her strategy of like quiet voice. There's all kinds of like smaller things in there too. Oh yeah, and explaining how to use the tools. Thanks, Mary. Yeah, it's so interesting to me when sometimes you can capture just a little bit like that and see so many different pieces in there. Yeah, and options, right? Choice is a big piece of early childhood. And so when we were looking at the components today and thinking about what would be like most helpful at this bird's eye view of the practices, is I kind of pulled out curriculum, the planning, and scaffolding and differentiating, because it feels like these are the big pieces that kind of tie it all together, right? Some of the other pieces are a little bit more and detailed, or you could get kind of in the weeds. So we're going to start with curriculum. And have you heard mirrors and windows before? Yeah, Laurel's shaking her head. Okay, so the idea of curriculum development is that we really want it to provide these mirrors and windows. So thinking the mirrors for kiddos to see themselves, their families, their communities reflected in the learning environment. And in the materials, in the activities, you see yourself in the classroom, but then also windows to the world, right? Windows into other people's lives, windows into other kinds of experiences. And this is where we get kind of that balance and that flexibility, and it allows us to make sure that we're addressing those biases that that Katie talked about earlier. So it really does. I love the imagery of this because it's kind of useful in all parts of your life, right? To kind of take it home for a little Zen moment of mirrors and windows in your own life, and thinking about where you have mirrors and where you have windows. But certainly we want to think about that in our curriculum. So, and when we look through our curriculum and we look around our classrooms and we look through our activities and our lesson plans, can we see these things? And so I encourage you to think about where you are, wherever you are, in your program, whether you're a classroom teacher or an administrator, to kind of take that view and see if we have those mirrors and windows built in, and we're using those opportunities, and thinking about the curriculum as those knowledge and skills and abilities that really help us to kind of grow and plan and look at our experiences. I was in a classroom the other day and I was watching, it was the building, they used creative curriculum, and it was buildings. And I was so in love with March children, right? Like, I don't know, it's like they've been in school long enough. I was witnessing all this great stuff around castles and making connections about, well, this is a castle and I put a cave over here. And I was like, oh my goodness, all this great vocabulary and experiences. And it was, all making those connections through their curriculum that their classroom team had worked so hard on. We do have some guidance around what equals a good curriculum, and this is from Illinois. So these are some indicators or things you want to consider, and really you want to think about your curriculum as being a roadmap that kind of tells you where to go. But it should be research-based. It should really, connect and define your approach, and it's going to create the foundation for your classroom. And obviously it's about children developing and learning, and it should give you some guidance around your teacher roles and identify your experiences that the kiddos need in order to learn. So, but I really like to think of it as a roadmap. And we have planning. What would we do without planning? We spend a lot of our time on this, right? So we really want to make sure just some tips around planning, and this is around, just making those connections with assessment again, is to backwards plan when we can, and use our current routines and make sure we're planning and assessing during routines, and we're using that documentation that Katie talked about. And also, our curriculum makes a connection to our Illinois Early Learning and Development Standards. And so there's a bunch of crosswalks that are at this on this website, but also thinking those are some tools, some assessment tools, and how they crosswalk with outcomes. And then, just thinking through that we're always looking across all those domains of learning. So we have those from our Illinois Early Learning Standards. And finally, we've got scaffolding. And this is that piece around really thinking about what children need in order to learn. And so really, I'm going to even go back. So thinking about what levels we want to put in to support that learning, and we can scaffold up and we can scaffold down, right? So we just need to know, using our assessment data, where our kiddos are, and then thinking about where we're going to put in some of our supports. And so sometimes you can think of it like this with the levels of prompting, where we're kind of thinking about how much support do you need to get this done? And is it, just a visual? Is it a verbal? Is it some, how much support do I need to actually help you do it? Do we need some hand over hand? But of course, we want to always keep to the least intrusive strategy that we can to support kiddos. I have another video that I'm going to show. And so this is a teacher, and it's real short again, showing some, this is from STEMI. And so these are, it's just ramps, and you look for the strategy she's using around scaffolding, the whole concept of ramps.
Can you help me? Can you put this ball? Let's see if it moves. Oh! It rolled down the sled. Can you get it? Come bring it back. Do you want to try? There it goes. I have something else that I wonder if this will go down the ramp. The wheels rolled down the ramp. There it goes. What do you think? Do you think this will roll down the ramp? No, try it. Ooh, I saw push it. When you pushed it, it moved, right? It didn't roll. It slid down the slide.
Okay. I just wanted to play the next one. That happened to a lady on the last webinar I was on today. She had a video going and she couldn't shut it off. Did you see some scaffolding there, some strategies? Did anybody, I didn't even look in the chat. Where are we? Oh, Michelle wants the slide. We can get you that slide. Katie's got it. This next one too really talks about some strategies with scaffolding. She was in the video, she was just asking questions, right? Just providing some kind of basic challenges, like what's going to happen if I do this? What's going to happen if I do that? And then of course, you know, getting a little animated to kind of support him in connecting. So this is just a sample. I'm not even sure which resource this came from, but so an example from blocks falling down and possible scaffolding that you might be doing, right? And you can kind of see the hierarchy, right? First, just asking some questions and then giving maybe some more ideas, making some suggestions, maybe building a sample, and then lastly, providing that scaffolding report, that actual physical support. And these are great things too. So if you're a classroom teacher or an administrator and you have some, sometimes you want to be communicating these strategies to perhaps like parent volunteers or your aides or assistants in the classroom, these can be a great strategy. Oh, and Katie found her prompt hierarchy. Thank you. She's quick. And lastly, we get to differentiating. And so this is the kind of that whole piece around, you know, individualizing when needed. And this was a challenge for me because many of you know, I could do a whole day on differentiating instruction. Like, so I was like, try to keep it small. And Antoinette's laughing at me because she knows. So what I decided to do was just do universal design for learning. So differentiating, especially for those of you, I know we had someone who was like teaching music up to like 5th grade or something. So differentiating, I always, it feels a little bit more elementary school, right? Because we always think about like differentiating input, output, and like how a child can show you what they learn. And it feels like a lot of the examples are usually like, you know, instead of writing your name, you could paint it. Like, okay, but we're not really worried about writing names a whole lot in preschool. And so I feel like universal design for learning is a little bit better of a match. So one of the handouts you got was, I think it was trilingual. So I know it was English and in Spanish and in another language that I don't know. I can't remember. But that handout really helps kind of walk through the universal design for learning. And really what we think about is we want multiple ways of engagement with play, with content. What are we doing? And so thinking about all the ways that children can access, and then multiple ways of representation. How can we show what of learning, right? And we do that naturally a lot in early childhood. We have a book, we have characters from the book. We might have Xerox the book and cut out the characters and put them on flannel board. Like we do a lot of different ways of representing the content, and that we're good at that, I think. And then multiple means of action and expression. So how do we, how do we play with it? How do we use it? How do we show what we're thinking and what we know? And I feel like I said, universal design for learning is kind of that basis. And if you haven't investigated CAST, which is CAST.org, I'm sure it's in the handout that Antoinette put together for us. There's all kinds of resources around universal design for learning. And so that kind of pulls those the basics for teaching and learning and kind of creating those meaningful goals. That was super high level, Antoinette. How did I do? Because when we were planning this, we were like, there's no way we can get through all of this. This is like, we could do a day on each of these pieces, really. So your assignment is to dig in and learn more from your end, right? Oh, you're muted, Antoinette.
You would think by now, 3 years in, check and see, is the microphone on? Now we're coming, as we kind of come to the not only, I feel emotional, the wind down of today, but the wind down of this entire series. We really think that, you know, silence is golden. So as Ann goes to the next slide, we want to just close our talking and give you an opportunity to reflect. Now, if you've been with us the entire series, you really could, you've got your paperwork, right? You've been looking at and making these reflections towards the end of each one. How do we put this all together? As Katie has said, and as Evelyn is scrolling through and keeping us what's up, you know, abreast of what's in the chat, all of this is about taking it back, taking it back. And Gloria, I'm not picking on you, but let's take this thing back to Ghana, right? DEC is an international organization. Just this past fall, DEC International was in Chicago. Evelyn and myself were co-chairs. We had 40 countries represented here in Illinois, right? So this is international work. Children are so much more alike than they are different, you know, no matter gender identity, location, whether it's in this country, in Illinois or Ghana or Georgia or Ghana. And so how do we put this work together to take it back in a way that makes it not only meaningful for the learners and the families, but meaningful for us, so that we're, you know, you're willing to invest in it. So we just want you to take a few minutes, and we're gonna just be comfortable with the silence for 3 minutes. And we want you all to just quietly reflect. About 90 more seconds. That's my little timer letting me know that our time, reflection time really should be ongoing, just like professional learning is ongoing, but our time in this moment is up. And just reading through some of the thoughts that you all are putting in as you are reflecting. Nice to know that a lot of what is mentioned. And Julie, I really appreciate that, because when we're consulting, when we're teaching, when we're project directoring, when you're administrating, when you are paraprofessionaling, we are going 100 miles a minute. And we don't always have the time or take the time to just say, you know what? I'm doing good work. And I love that you mentioned, it's nice to know that a lot of what is mentioned is being done, right? Now we just want to be more thoughtful about asking, making sure it's meeting the needs of the children. And this is where this piece of the developmentally appropriate practice, and that one of the 8 DEC recommended practices, assessment is not so much evaluating children or their teachers or districts. We have to just press pause. At some point in time in the teaching and learning experience, we have to press pause so that we can see, okay, we've been teaching, have the children been learning? And if they haven't been, we can look at what we've observed, what we've documented, and determine what our next steps will be. So it's, like, I've been doing this. I feel like I'm on the right path, and this just helps me know to keep doing it, being maybe a little bit more intentional. Laurel, I definitely agree. Hearing the same information over and over, it helps it kind of marinate, right? It lets that jello mold set a little bit more, which oftentimes, as a consultant, I hear that from not only educators, but administrators and districts. I'm constantly hearing, Dr. Taylor, we never have a chance for any initiative or reform to really set. And as soon as we think that, like, we've got this down pat, then another, kind of a monkey wrench is thrown in. So the more we hear and the more we practice, it really begins to become internalized, and then becomes, as we've heard Katie and Ann say so much today, it becomes an embedded part of our teaching, our lesson planning, being flexible. It becomes embedded in everything that we do. Be consistent, collaborate, Bozina, collaborate. When we collaborate, no one carries the burden alone. I think there's an African proverb: if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, we have to go together. So I love hearing that thought. I'm looking forward to more self-reflection on integrating DAP. That, Samantha, and I'll kind of end there as the rest of you all coming. That ECTA, it is, Ann and I also do the Illinois Principals Association Administrators Academy on Inclusion. We do it every year in the fall. And that ECTA, we included in there. You could just get yourself some popcorn and some green tea with some lemon and ginger and honey. You could be on that ECTA website just all day long, really gathering so much really good information. And so we encourage you to look at those, all of those resources that are on the handout that you have. And as we close it up, we just want to remind you, as we look at the next slide.
Sorry, I'm in the wrong spot. There you go.
We have brought this information to you today from NAEYC's Developmentally Appropriate Practice and DEC's Recommended Practices. However, we want you to know that in Illinois, there is an Illinois AEYC subdivision, and there is an Illinois DEC subdivision. So just like your presenters today, we are involved with Illinois AEYC, we are involved with Illinois DEC. Both websites are there. Learn more about your subdivision. This is how you can get involved. Our Head Start colleagues that are on here, love. Illinois AEYC has really partnered with us to get the word out so that we can have our community-based programs. Head Start, early Head Start I saw on here as well. Our home-based programs. The more we know, I sound like a commercial. The more we know, the more we grow. But really and truly, that is true. And these are all of our children. And at one time or another, all of our children, they're going to interface with each other. If it's not in the community, it could be in a first grade or a kindergarten classroom. So we want to be as collegial as we possibly can across learning environments. Our next slide. Look for us coming up. Evelyn, as I said, who is the I Am Every Woman. She is the co-chair of the upcoming Sharing a Vision conference. We are really looking to just keep that momentum going from the DEC International Conference that was held in September.
Don't leave Ann out. Excuse me, Ann is also the co-chair. Ann and Evelyn are co-chairs.
Ann and Evelyn are both the co-chairs. Sorry about that, Ann. So sorry. And I'm in trouble too, because I owe them both some emails. Anyway, that's a whole other thing. But Ann and Evelyn are both the co-chairs. We're looking to keep the momentum going from the DEC conference, which was overwhelmingly successful. But this is like our own special Illinois flavor. So here's the information about it. Go on the website. The Illinois DEC website, there's a link on there that says Sharing a Vision. You can sign up to get updates about the conference. Let me tell you, those rooms go so fast at the conference site. And then we end up having to, people do overflow hotels. So go ahead and jump on the Illinois DEC website and you can learn more about Sharing a Vision. And then Ann has also put the Sharing a Vision link in there as you go to the next slide.
Okay, and April 10th, registration opens, right? Am I right, Evelyn?
Yep, that's it. April 10th.
For the conference.
Yeah, so, I know some of you want to get that all organized before you go off for the summer.
And is that registration and room reservations and will open up April 10th?
Yeah, I think room reservations are open right now.
Yeah, they are open right now. You wouldn't know it, but you can get rooms now.
And what's the special code that they would, is it just SAV 23 or something like that?
I don't know. I think I just
I don't know.
See, I had a link. I can find it for you. I believe there's a link on the website.
No, come to me.
So
reserve your room. It goes, they fill up so quickly. We hope to see you there. Stop and tap us on the shoulder if you are there. Also want to let you know that, as we said, ECPL, Early Choices, Illinois STARNET, this series is ending, but everyone remains to continue to serve all of you. Head Start, Early Head Start, home-based, district, private, parochial, all are here to serve, and here are their websites. Next slide, please. STARNET is literally across the state. Here's how the regions are set up. So when you go on that STARNET website, you can find your region, and then that'll connect you to, the correct region for your area. I do know that a lot of things are virtual, and sometimes you might see something on another region that you might want to join, but that for that technical support and assistance, you want to be in your region. And woohoo, we did it. And we went from last year, I don't know, we know we need to do something, several iterations, believe me when I tell you, to this. And so we did it, and we could not have done it without you all. And I mean, not only did you all register, but there are 71 participants on here today. And that's in this third year of being virtual and Zooming, and we don't know whether we're up or down or in or out. Each one has grown, and so we're just so really grateful for all of you all for joining us. Stay tuned for things to come. Thank you, and I'll turn you over now into the hands of the wonderful Susie Finn.
Thanks so much, Antoinette. And thank you to the other two presenters, to Katie and Ann. And thanks for your participation this afternoon. So if you would like to participate in additional early childhood professional learning webinars, please be sure to visit our website at eclearningil.org. And then you will also find, and I'm going to Okay, so there is the website for WIDA, but you can also find that link on our ECPL website page. If you just select partners at the top first page of the ECPL website, and it'll provide a list of all our partners, our early childhood partners, and you will find WIDA as well as other links there. So just some last few minute quick reminders. So for attending the full webinar today, you'll receive an evaluation email following this session. And once you complete it, you'll be directed to the evidence of completion. Gateway's credit is also going to be provided for those whose full names were provided. There were a couple of individuals that had listed just your first name, and I couldn't check you in just due to the fact of the commonality of the name. So if you want to share with me your last name, I'll be sure to do so. Any additional links provided in the chat today and throughout the session, we will provide them in the follow-up email as well. And then the recording will be on the YouTube channel within the next week. And as Antoinette mentioned, we are going to have a drawing for the NAEYC book, Developmentally Appropriate Practice, but we will be doing it after the session, and you will be notified if your name was drawn. And then if you have any additional questions following the webinar, please be sure to send an email to ecpl@cntrmail.org. Thanks again, everybody. We really appreciate your participation in this whole series. Thank you again, Antoinette, Dr. Taylor. It's fun to say now.
Susie, can you repeat the email again for
Yep.
them to reach out if they have a question or don't get the link or something? It's
There you go. Thank you, Teresa.
it's ECPL.
Yeah, at cntrmail.org. Sorry, I think I sent that to an individual.
Uh-oh.
There you go.
You beat me to it. I was going to ask you for it, but you put it already in there. So good job.
And then, as I said, you know, with WIDA, I'll put that in again. If there is still a Sandra, thank you. Got it. I think we have you on here now. Okay, I appreciate it. So I think we're good. So if you do not have any further questions for our presenters or for me, you are welcome to sign out at this time.
All right, thanks.
Thank you again, everybody.
Thank you.